All right. Development. We're looking at domains out of the project engineering. Development approach and lifecycle performance domain. The development approach and lifecycle performance domain address activities and functions associated with the development approach, cadence, and lifecycle phases of the project. Come here, Peaches. Effective execution of this performance domain results in the following desired outcomes. A project lifecycle consisting of phases that connect the delivery of business and stakeholder value from the beginning to the end of the project. A project lifecycle consisting of phases that facilitate the delivery cadence and development approach required to produce the project deliverables. This performance domain entails establishing the development approach, delivery cadence, and project lifecycle needed to optimize the project outcomes. A couple key terms here. A deliverable is any unique and verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service that is required to be produced to complete a process, phase, or project. Development approach. A method used to create and evolve the product, service, or result during the project lifecycle, such as predictive, iterative, incremental, adaptive, or hybrid method. These are your methodologies. Cadence. A rhythm of activities conducted throughout the project. Project phase. A collection of logically related project activities that accumulates in the completion of one or more deliverables. Project life cycle. The series of phases that a project passes through from its start to its completion. The type of project deliverables determines how it can be developed. The type of deliverable and the development approach influence the number and cadence for project deliveries. The deliverable approach and desired delivery cadence determine the project lifecycle and its phases. Excuse me. Delivery cadence refers to the timing and frequency of project deliverables. Projects can have a single delivery, multiple deliveries, or periodic deliveries. A single delivery, projects that have a single delivery at the end of the project. For example, a process reengineering project may not have any deliveries until the near end of the project when the process is rolled out. Multiple deliveries. Some projects have multiple deliveries. A project may have multiple components that are delivered at different times throughout the project. A project to develop a new drug may have multiple deliveries, such as preclinical submissions, phase 1 trial results, phase 2 trial results, phase 3 trial results, registration, and then launch. In this example, the deliveries are sequential. Some projects have deliveries that are developed separately rather than sequentially, such as a project to update building security. Deliveries may include physical barriers to entry, new badges, new key code pads, and so forth. Each of these is a separate delivery, but they do not need to come in a specific order. All of the deliveries are concluded before the project is considered to be completed. A lot of your construction projects are based off of a multiple delivery approach. Yeah, stages of houses. Periodic deliveries. Periodic deliveries are like multiple deliveries, but they are on a fixed delivery schedule, such as monthly or bi monthly. A new software application may have internal deliveries every 2 weeks and then periodically release the deliveries into the market. Studying the project management uh, curriculum, has changed a lot recently, and periodic deliveries used to be kind of this gray area where you can't have periodic deliveries in a project because then it's not a project, it's a program, which was superseding. So, this is one of the very key ways they've also changed their curriculum and how they down and how they straighten out their wording and get it all delivered. Unlike me, who is just completely clustering my wording. Oh, you're doing something. Another delivery option to be aware of, though, it's called continuous delivery. Continuous delivery is the practice of delivering feature increments immediately to customers, often through the use of small batches of work and automation technology. Continuous delivery can be used for digital products. From the product management perspective, the emphasis is on delivering benefits and value throughout the product lifecycle. Similar to a project, there are aspects that are development oriented. However, similar to a program, they can be many development cycles as well as maintenance activities. This type of undertaking works better with project teams that are stable and remain intact. Because the project teams are focused on one product, they can apply learning about the product, the stakeholders, and the market. This allows the team to respond to market trends and stay focused on value delivery. This practice is included in several approaches, such as DevOps. There's a hashtag in here, I'm sorry. Pound sign no projects and continuous digital, for example. I'm actually going to look at that. That's interesting. Yeah, okay. Action. A development approach is the means used to create and evolve the product, service, or result during the project lifecycle. There are different development approaches, and different industries may use different terms to refer to development approaches. Three commonly used approaches are predictive, hybrid, and adaptive. Waterfall, agile. Well, I think hybrid would actually stay as hybrid. Predictive is waterfall. Adaptive is also used to be known as agile. These approaches are often viewed as a spectrum, from the predictive approach on the end of the spectrum to the adaptive on the other end. A predictive approach is useful when the project and product requirements can be defined, collected, and analyzed at the start of the project. This may also be referred to as a waterfall approach. This approach may also be used when there is a significant investment involved and a high level of risk that may require frequent reviews, change control mechanisms, replanning between development phases. The scope, schedule, cost, resource, and risks can be well defined in the early phases of the project cycle. And they are, sorry about that. The scope, schedule, cost, resource, and risks can be well defined in the early phases of the project lifecycle under a predictive approach, and they are relatively stable. This development approach allows the project team to reduce the level of uncertainty early in the project and do much of the planning up front. Predictive approaches may use proof of concept developments to explore options, but the majority of the project work follows the plans that were developed near the start of the project. Many times, the projects that use this approach have templates from previous similar projects. A hybrid approach. A hybrid development approach is a combination of adaptive and predictive approaches. This means that some elements from a predictive approach are used and some are from an adaptive approach are used. This development approach is useful when there is uncertainty or risk around the requirements. Hybrid is also useful when deliverables can be modularized or when there are deliverables that can be developed by different project teams. A hybrid approach is more adaptive than a predictive approach, but less so than a purely adaptive approach. Hybrid approaches often use an iterative or incremental development approach. An iterative approach is useful for clarifying requirements and investigating various options. An iterative approach may produce sufficient capability to be considered acceptable prior to the final iteration. An incremental approach is used to produce a deliverable throughout a series of iterations. Each iteration adds functionality within a predetermined time box. The deliverable contains the capability to be considered as completed only after the final iteration. An example of a hybrid approach could be using an adaptive approach to develop a product that has significant uncertainty associated with the requirements. However, the deployment of the product can be done using a predictive approach. Another example is a project with two main deliverables where one deliverable is developed using an adaptive approach and the other using a predictive approach. Say a contract that is for the upgrade of a water pumping station is the main deliverable, and another deliverable is a chemical treatment center, chemical treatment pad facility as a secondary deliverable. Sorry. Adaptive approach. Adaptive approaches are useful when requirements are subject to a high level of uncertainty and volatility and are likely to change throughout the project. A clear vision is established at the start of the project, and then initial known requirements are refined, detailed, changed, or replaced in accordance with user feedback, the environment, or unexpected events. Adaptive approaches use iterative and incremental approaches. However, on the far side of the adaptive methods, the iterations tend to get shorter and the product is more likely to evolve based on stakeholder feedback. When agility is a wide mindset that is broader than the development framework, agile approaches can be considered adaptive. Some agile approaches entail iterations that are 1 to 2 weeks in duration with a demonstration of the accomplishments at the end of each iteration. The project team is very engaged with the planning for each iteration. The project team will determine the scope they can achieve based on a prioritized backlog, estimate the work involved, and work collaboratively throughout the iteration to develop the scope. Here's some considerations for selecting a development approach. How are you going to plan your product? Degree of innovation. Deliverables where the scope and requirements are well understood, that the project team has worked with before, and that allow for planning upfront are well suited to a predictive approach. Deliverables that have a high degree of innovation or where the project team does not have experience are better suited to a more adaptive approach. Any requirements certainty. When the requirements are well known and easy to define, a predictive approach fits well. When requirements are uncertain, volatile, or complex and are expected to evolve throughout the project, a more adaptive approach may be a better fit. I also want to look at scope stability. If the scope of the deliverable is stable and not likely to change, a predictive approach is useful. If the scope is expected to have many changes, an approach that is closer to the adaptive side of the spectrum can be useful. Ease of change. Related to the requirement certainty and the scope stability. If the nature of the deliverable makes it difficult to manage and incorporate changes, then a predictive approach is best. Deliverables that can adapt easily to change can use an approach that is more adaptive. Delivery options. As described in previous sections on delivery cadence, the nature of the deliverable and whether it can be delivered in components influences the development approach. Products, services, or results that can be developed and or delivered in pieces are aligned with incremental, iterative, or adaptive approaches. Some large projects plan using a predictive approach, but there may be some pieces that can be developed and delivered incrementally. Risk. Products that are inherently high risk require analysis before choosing the development approach. Some high risk products may require significant upfront planning and rigorous processes to reduce threats. Other products can reduce risk by building them modularly and adapting the design and development based on learning to take advantage of emerging opportunities or reduce the exposure to threats. Safety requirements. Products that have rigorous safety requirements often use a predictive approach as there is a need for significant upfront planning to ensure that all the safety requirements are identified, planned for, created, integrated, and tested. Regulations. Environments that have significant regulatory oversight may need to use a predictive approach due to the required process, documentation, and demonstration needs. Now, as for project variables that influence the development approach, these are centered around stakeholders, schedule constraints, and funding availability. Stakeholders. Projects that use adaptive methods require significant stakeholder involvement throughout the process. Certain stakeholders, such as the product owner, play a substantial role in establishing and prioritizing work. Schedule constraints. If there's a need to deliver something early, even if it's not a finished product, an iterative or adaptive approach is beneficial. Funding availability. Projects that work in an environment of funding uncertainty can benefit from an adaptive or iterative approach. A minimum viable product can be released with less investment than an elaborate product. This allows for market testing or market capture with minimum investment. Further investments can be made based on the market response to the product or service. Organizational variables such as the structure, culture, capability. Oh, sorry, I lost my place. Project team size and location influence the development approach. Culture. A predictive approach fits better in an organization with a culture of managing and directing, where the work is planned out and progress is measured against baselines. Adaptive approaches fit better with an organization that emphasizes project team self management. Organizational capability. Transitioning from predictive development approaches to adaptive approaches and in using agile methods is more than just stating that the organization will now be agile. It entails shifting the mindset starting at the executive level throughout the organization. Organizational policies, ways of working, reporting structure, and aptitude should all be aligned in order to employ adaptive methods successfully. You also want to look at project team size and location. Adaptive approaches, especially agile methods, often work better with project teams of 7 or more. Adaptive approaches also favor project teams that are located in the same physical space. Large project teams and teams that are mostly virtual may do better by using an approach that is closer to the predictive side of the spectrum. However, there are approaches that seek to scale up the adaptive approaches to work with large and dispersed project teams. Look at life cycle and phase definitions. The type and number of project phases in a project lifecycle depend upon many variables, chief among them the delivery cadence and a development approach. As described previously, example of phases in a lifecycle include feasibility. This phase determines if the business case is valid and if the organization has the capability to deliver the intended outcome. Design. Planning and analysis lead to the design of the project deliverable that will be developed. Build. Construction of the deliverable with integrated quality assurance activities is conducted. Test. Final quality review and inspection of deliverables are carried out before transition, go live, or acceptance by the customer. Deploy. Project deliverables are put into use and transitional activities required for sustainment, benefits realization, and organizational change management are completed. Close. The project is closed. Project knowledge and artifacts are archived. Project team members are released and contracts are closed. Project phases often have a phase gate review, also known as a stage gate, to check that the desired outcomes or exit criteria for the phase have been achieved before proceeding to the next phase. Exit criteria may tie to acceptance criteria for deliverables, contractual obligations, meeting specific performance targets, or other tangible measures. Feasibility, design, build, test, deploy, close. Perfect project. In more adaptive projects, you have your concept, your plan, then your design, and you build. Then you have to go back to plan, design, and build. Plan, design, and build. Each level. And then finally, after several of those levels, close. I prefer the traditional, 6: feasibility, design, build, test, deploy, close. Aligning of delivery cadence, development approach, and life cycle. The community center that was described in the earlier examples will be revisited in these examples. But what we need to focus on is a potential life cycle might be startup, plan, development, test, deploy, and close. Startup. Entry criteria for this phase are that the business case has been approved and a project charter has been authorized. In this phase, the high-level roadmap is developed, initial funding requirements are established, and project team and resource requirements are defined. A milestone schedule is created, and planning for a procurement strategy is defined. These deliverables should be complete prior to exiting the startup phase. Exit criteria will be reviewed at an origination phase gate review. Plan. In this phase, the high-level information for the building is decomposed into detailed plans. A detailed design document for the CAP training is completed. An analysis of the senior services offering is completed along with gap analysis. The CAP training and the senior services are examples from their earlier example to highlight the different lessons in this section, which is all based off of building a community center. The initial wireframe for the website, the community center's website, is created. These deliverables should be completed prior to exiting the planning phase. Exit criteria will be reviewed at a exit gate review. Development. The phase will overlap with the test and deploy phases since the deliverables have different delivery cadences and different approaches. If you're building something and it's from the ground up and you want it to have a website, there's going to be there should be a lot of different projects within the program of your new building, which then reports to the PMO. Deploy. This phase will overlap with the development and test phases. The first deployment of the website may be early in the project. Activities in this phase will iterate as more deliverables become available. The final deployment for this project will be the opening of the building. In this example, your website could be designed early and even rolled into marketing and being used as an organizational process asset in the grand opening of the actual physical structures. Closing. This phase takes place periodically as deliverables are completed. When the initial website has been deployed, project personnel will be released and retrospectives or lessons learned for each deliverable will be completed. When the entire project is done, information from the various phase gate reviews and an overall evaluation of project performance compared to baselines will be conducted. Prior to final closeout, the project charter and business case will be reviewed to determine if the deliverables achieve the intended benefits and value. The development approach and lifecycle performance domain interacts with the stakeholder planning, uncertainty, delivery, project work, and team performance domains. This domain interacts with all other domains. The life cycle selected impacts the way in which planning is undertaken. The predictive life cycles undertake the bulk of the planning upfront and then continue to replan by using rolling wave planning and progressive elaboration. Plans are also updated as threats and opportunities materialize. The development approach and delivery cadence is one way to reduce uncertainty on projects. A deliverable that has a lot of risk associated with meeting regulatory requirements may choose a predictive approach to build in extra testing, documentation, and robust processes and procedures. A deliverable that has a lot of risk associated with stakeholder acceptance may choose an iterative approach and release a minimum viable product to the market to get feedback before developing additional features and functions. The development approach and lifecycle domain has significant overlap with the delivery performance domain when considering delivery cadence and development approach. The delivery cadence is one of the main drivers of delivering value in alignment with the business case and the benefits realization plans. Eliciting the product requirements and meeting the quality requirements as described in the delivery performance domain have a significant influence on the development approach. The team performance domain and development approach and lifecycle performance domain interact when it comes to project team capabilities and project team leadership skills. The project team's way of working and a project manager's style vary significantly depending on the development approach. A predictive approach usually entails more emphasis on upfront planning, measurement, and control. On the other end of the spectrum, an adaptive approach, especially when using agile methods, requires more of a servant leadership style and may have self-managing project team.